Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jackie. I'm your Sublimation Business Coach, and today we're talking all about printers. So if you've been thinking about upgrading or you're just getting started in your research phase, stay tuned because I'm about to give you the good, the bad, the ugly when it comes to the two major players, which is Sawgrass and Epson. Okay, so the first thing I want to get out of the way is talking about converted printers. So if you're just getting started in your research phase, you're going to hear a lot of shit about converting Epson printers to sublimation printers, which basically means you're going to buy an inkjet printer and you're going to put sublimation ink in it, and it's going to be half the cost of a regular sublimation printer. This might work for some people, but let me tell you, there is way more of a chance of stuff going wrong with a printer that's not meant for sublimation, and it's not covered under warranty. So if something happens to go wrong, you're just gonna have to chuck that in the garbage, go out and buy a new printer anyway, and then if you have to buy another one, you're already at the cost of a regular sublimation printer. So just keep that in mind. This channel will never be about converting printers. I'm only gonna talk about turnkey sublimation printers. So let's start with Sawgrass. So Sawgrass has two models. One is your Sawgrass 500, which is your smaller format. It costs about $500. And the other is your Sawgrass 1000, which is your larger format, and I'll talk about that in a second, but that cost is about $1,500. There are two major differences with these printers. So one is your Sawgrass 500 can print up to 8.5 by 14 wide, so you can even get a little bit longer than this. So you can print, it's pretty good for shirts, it's not terrible. But if you're doing smaller items like coasters, keychains, things like that, this printer will be just fine for you. But if you are looking to do larger things like maybe printing bigger prints for shirts, on your Sawgrass 1000, you can print up to 13 by 19. This is the paper you can put in your Sawgrass 1000. One thing I have to note is that if you are doing this, if you want to do this big of paper, you will need the bypass tray, which is on the back of the printer. It is a separate attachment for the printer and does cost about $200. So you're at about $1,500 plus $200 for the bypass tray if you want to do that wide of paper. So your Sawgrass 500 is also great for, you can do full wraps on your 20-ounce skinnies. So if you're looking to do full wraps, the paper fits around your skinnies perfectly fine, so you are good there. You can also do your 22-ounce fatties just barely. Let me show you why. Because your 22-ounce fatties, they're just a fatter version of the skinny tumblers, but it reaches, but it's just barely, it just barely overlaps there. So you can get it, but it is going to be awfully close. What you cannot do with the Sawgrass 500 is 30-ounce skinnies. It's just not tall enough there. So you can't do your 30-ounce skinnies, which your 30-ounce skinnies are just a little bit bigger than your 20-ounce skinnies, obviously. And then the other things you can't do, just to keep it real with you guys, is you can't do things like 32-ounce water bottles because it's not wide enough. So there's a lot of limitations when it comes to the size of the paper. A lot of things you can do, but also a lot of things you can't. So if you can afford it, I do suggest if you're going with Sawgrass to do the 1000 because it just keeps your options open. So if you're going with the Sawgrass 1000, again, you can print on 13 by 19 paper, which is nice and big. So if you're doing sweatshirts and hoodies and things like that, you can get a nice wide print. This is especially good when you're doing 2XLs or 3XLs. You can get that wider print on those shirts. Also, glass cutting boards are a big seller, and just some of those bigger items, laptop cases and things like that. So you're gonna have a lot more options with the larger format of the Sawgrass. Now, here's the things that I liked about using the Sawgrass. When you get a Sawgrass, it comes with Creative Studio, which is a very entry-level, user-friendly design software. It gives you actual templates of the products that you can use, and it helps you design and bring in designs into that software so that you can easily print it at the right size of each product that you're pressing. And another thing that I liked was that it has lasted me. I got it in 2018. It still runs perfectly fine, and we can still use it if we wanted to, and I like that it has that, it gives me that confidence that it is a well-made product. Here's what I did not like about the Sawgrass. I did not like, first and foremost, the cost of the ink is insane compared to Epson ink. Now, while we're talking about inks, side note, I only recommend using manufacturer's ink. I don't recommend substituting any ink. It will void your warranty. I even think Sawgrass right now will put lines through your prints if you don't use their ink, because I'm pretty sure they make most of their money on the ink, not the printer. So they started putting lines through your designs if you're not using their ink. So keep that in mind. So the cost of the ink was $131 for a 70 milliliter cartridge. So every time you needed to replace a cartridge, and it comes with 4, it would cost you 131 bucks. They always go out at the same time usually, so you're usually spending about $500. Now, it did get me about $15,000 in revenue before it was gone, so that was kind of nice, but it was expensive compared to the Epson. Another thing that I didn't like with the Sawgrass 1000 was on the bypass tray, when we did print on 13 by 19 paper, we got a ton of paper jams. It was so frustrating. So if we had big jobs to print or wholesale orders and we were printing on the bypass tray, I had to babysit that printer and make sure that that paper was being fed perfectly. Otherwise it would get jammed. So keep that in mind. Now let's get into the Epson. So there are 2 versions also of the Epson F170 and the Epson F570. The 170 is again about $500 in comparison to the Sawgrass 500. They're about the same cost, same exact concept. It prints on 8.5 by 11 paper. So you can still get pretty decent sized prints if you're doing shirts and things like that. You can get away with it. Now the larger format of the Epson is the Epson F570, which is what we use here. The cost is $2,500, but don't let that scare you, because the cost of ink is 3 times less expensive than the Sawgrass, and probably even more so, because with the Sawgrass, again, let's reiterate, 70 milliliter cartridge for a Sawgrass is about $131. This little bottle here is $20 and it's 140 milliliters. So you're getting double the amount for 3 times less the cost. So you're gonna have a huge savings in the ink alone if you go with Epson. So there is that. Epson F570 prints up to 24 inches wide. This, just for reference, and it prints as long as you want, and it auto cuts it for you. So this is only 17 inches wide, and it prints it as long, so you can get one job on one long piece of paper. We've had pieces of paper go all the way out to the front door over there, so it cuts down a ton of waste, a ton of printing time. So I love that about the Epson. Also, your Epson comes with your RIP software. It comes with Epson RIP software, which can automatically nest all of your prints into a perfectly aligned little area so that you don't waste as much paper. So that is awesome. But we have been printing on that F570 for about 6 months, and let me tell you, it has been twice as vibrant. Okay, so I don't love everything about the Epson though. There are a couple little nuances that are a little annoying. So we do a lot of mugs and we do a lot of one-off prints, and I can't print on 3.5 by 9 paper. So usually we would, and I love printing on this paper because it's always straight. You don't have to worry about cutting, but I loved that I could print on this size paper with the Sawgrass because this would go perfectly onto a mug. Not the biggest deal in the world because we can always cut down the paper, but we have to cut down the paper. So sometimes there's a chance the cut is not perfectly straight. So I don't like that about the Epson. Which leads me into the next thing that I don't really love is the cutting of the Epson. So we actually just upgraded our paper cutter to a 24 inch, and it's been amazing, but it is a little difficult to cut sometimes. Before that, we were using a pizza cutter type of paper cutter, and we would just put it down on a big table and basically cut it manually, which never had good straight cuts. And then we would move it over to our 12-inch paper cutter and we would cut it from there. So the cutting has been a little bit of a pain point and a little bit getting used to when it comes to the Epson F570. And one more thing that can be a little bit frustrating about the Epson F570 is that if you are too far, it's completely wireless. So you're on Bluetooth. So if you are too far from the printer, then sometimes your print will stop mid-print and you will have to go back and reprint it. So we did notice that happen sometimes. I believe there is a cord you can use to plug directly into your computer so you don't have to be Bluetooth, but that is one thing worth mentioning. So in conclusion, if you're looking for a turnkey sublimation printer, we are gonna highly recommend going with Epson. We love the cost of the ink, first of all. We love that you can print on bigger pieces of paper. So specifically the F570, if you can afford it, again, it's $2,500. If you cannot, maybe start with the F170 or buy sublimation printers from somebody who prints them. You can find vendors all over the place on Etsy who will print transfers for you. So maybe save enough profit until you can afford the F570. Ever since we switched to the Epson, I do feel like we are more efficient with our printing times, with the cost of the ink, with saving paper. So that is why we are going to recommend the Epson to you guys. Hopefully you found this video valuable. If you did, do me a favor, give me a like. Don't forget, we sell sublimation blanks. We do sell the transfers, we sell designs and tumbler presses and all that fun stuff. So check us out, tcbblankshop.com. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you guys are updated every time we drop a new tutorial, and we will see you next time. Bye.